This is the video for the Chapter 2 quiz review. For number 1, we want to write each decimal as a fraction in simplest form. So the decimal is 0.8. So if you say that in words, 0.8 is 8/10 because it's in the tenths place. And to simplify it, you divide by the GCF of 8 and 10, which is 2, and that gives you 4/5. So this is how you show your work for number 1. It's C 4/5. For number 2, write each fraction or mixed number as a decimal. So I want a 10, 100, or 1,000 in the denominator when I do this. So I'm going to take 13 250ths, and I am going to try to get the denominator to up to 1,000 because I can't get this to 10 or 100. So I'm going to take it to 1,000. So I'm going to multiply by 4, the denominator and the numerator. And 13 times 4 is 52. So I have 52 thousandths, and that is written like this. The 2 ends in the thousandths place, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So the answer is 0.052. So again, the trick to this is to get the denominator to an equivalent fraction of 10, 100, or 1,000 so you can turn it into a decimal easily. Okay, for number 3 and 4, we are writing percents as fractions and fractions as percents. So write 32% as a fraction. So 32% means 32 out of 100. And then we just need to simplify this, and I found the GCF of 32 and 100 is 4. I wonder if some of you divided by 2 and then had to divide by 2 again. But in the end, you should get 8/25 for number 3. Number 4, write the fraction as a percent. So I want to get a 100 in the denominator. I have 1/5. So I have a 5 in the denominator. To get 100 in the denominator so I can make it a percent, I multiply by 20 to the denominator and numerator. So 20 hundredths, 20 out of 100 is 20%. Okay, 5 and 6, we write a percent as a decimal and a decimal as a percent. So 5, write 29% as a decimal. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can write 29% as a fraction and then 29 hundredths as a decimal. So the 9 would be in the hundredths place. Or you can move the decimal. So make sure you cross off the old decimal after 29 and move it 2 to the left to turn a percent into a decimal and rewrite it clean. 0.29. So my arrow is going to the left. For number 6, you have 0.45. We need to write it as a percent. So I think of 0.45 as 45 hundredths. And there it is out of 100 already for us. So 45 out of 100 is 45%. Or you could move the decimal. So you cross off the old decimal, and when you go from decimal to percent, you move it 2 to the right. So my arrow is going to the right, and that makes 45%. 45, then the decimal is 45. All right, now the rest of these are all about percents greater than 100 or less than 1. So these are a little more complicated. For number 7, write 225% as a decimal and a mixed number or fraction in simplest form. So we have 225%. There's a couple things we can do. You could instantly turn it into a decimal using the move the decimal method. So cross off the old, go 2 to the left when you turn a percent to a decimal, which gives you 2.25. Then you can think of that as 2 and 25 hundredths and simplify that to 2 and 1/4 by dividing by 25. Or you could think of this as 225 out of 100. Simplify it, that gives you, when you divide by 25, 9/4, and make that a mixed number, 2 and 1/4. Now, I went here, 9/4, and did the scary long division method to get it into a decimal. 9 divided by 4, you could do that. 4 goes into 9 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. Remember, you'd bring in super decimal and a 0 friend, so you can bring down a 0. 4 goes into 10 twice. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract. Bring down a 0. 4 goes into 25 times. You could also, I was going to say you could turn the 4 into a hundredth. So you could, take 9/4, for example, and you could do times 25. And that's going to give you 100. 9 times 25 is going to be, think quarters, 100, 200, 225. And 225 hundredths is written with the 5 in the hundredths place. So there's the 5 in the hundredths place. So it would be written 2.25. So you might have done that way too. Okay. Which I guess you could have taken it from here and written it as 225 hundredths and just gone right to there too. Here's number 8. 0.06%, write it as a decimal and a mixed number or fraction in simplest form. So the easiest way to do this is to move the decimal 2 to the left. You have a percent, cross off this decimal, move it 2 to the left. That gives you 0.0006. There's your decimal. This is 6 10,000ths. It's in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths place. So 6 10,000ths simplified, divide by the GCF 2, gives you 3 5,000ths. So there's your fraction in simplest form. All right, number 9, write the mixed number 4 1/5 as a percent. So I need to, when I have a percent, I'm trying to get my denominator to 100. So 4 1/5 is an improper fraction. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21, so that's 21/5. So I want to get the fifths to hundredths, so I can make it a percent. So 5 times 20 is 100. Do the same to the numerator. 21 times 20, I had to do that over here, is 420. And so now we have a number out of 100, so that numerator is the percent number. All right, here's number 10. 1 250th, write that as a percent. So again, I want to get my denominator eventually to 100, or in this case it got weird because 250 can't go down to 100. So I took it up to thousandths. So 250 times 4 is 1,000. 1 times 4 is 4. And I wrote this as a decimal. 4 thousandths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. All right, so then I took this decimal and I converted it to a percent by moving the decimal 2 to the right. So down here I crossed off the old, moved it 2 to the right, and that gave me 0.4%. It would have gotten really weird if I tried to break this down to 100. It would have, if I divided here, it just would give me a decimal in the numerator, which is always kind of weird, but maybe you did that. I show you how to do that down here, so we will talk about that too. If in case you do that, it's okay. All right, here's number 11. 7.2, write that as a percent. So a lot of you might have done this quick way right here where you have 7.2. You cross off the old decimal, move it 2 to the right, and that gives you 720. 720 decimal is 720. Some of you may have said, oh, this is 7 2/10. And I need to get it, since we're doing percents, I need to get the denominator to 100. Well, you could have turned 2/10 into hundredths, or I turned it into an improper fraction first. So 10 times 7 is 70, plus 2 is 72 tenths. Multiply by 10, so I can get 100 in the denominator. That gives me 720 out of 100, so it's 720%. And last but not least, number 12, 0.0078, we're turning into a percent. So this is that weird thing I was talking to you about. If you did say, okay, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, this is 78 10,000ths. So to get 10,000ths to 100, I'd have to divide by 100. It's just weird, hence my sad face, to have that decimal in the numerator. But if you think of it as 0.78 out of 100, that's 0.78%. So it kind of works. I bet a lot of you just move the decimal. So you take the decimal from here, move it 2 to the right to turn it into a percent. So that would be 0.78%. Okay, and that's the review. The quiz is just like the review with different numbers.